Yeah, so I recently finished my master's in art history. I wrote about moths, art and the Anthropocene. And when I was thinking about collecting films, well, first of all, also I come from an art background, so I think through images first and not necessarily cinema. So it's been a really interesting experiment finding experimental cinema and art crossover. And of course, they have a long marriage together. But yeah, I mean, insects are in art in like diverse, various ways. So I wasn't sure how to approach it. But I decided I'm going to read a little bit of some sections from my introduction about extinction and insects, and then basically have 13 short films that should give some picture of insects in imaginative, creative ways that hopefully like attest to their behaviors and natures in intimate, meaningful ways when we're thinking about environmental crisis and humans and insects together. Okay, start. The insect populations worldwide are experiencing a significant decline. They're hugely vulnerable to ecological changes as they are entangled with almost every part of the terrestrial environment and have been for millions of years. They are well represented in the animal world, with 3 out of every 4 known species being insects, and yet they're often disregarded and maligned. The disappearance of insect diversity has ramifications for plants, animals, food sources, decomposition processes, and more. Insects are crucial to human survival and earthly stability. They are ecological in terms of relations. As philosopher Jane Bennett notes, to call something ecological is to draw attention to its necessary implications in a network of relations, to mark its persistent tendency to enter into a working system. The ways that people respond to insects also affects the lives of other living things. The insecticides and poisons used to target insects in agriculture and everyday use, for instance, leave their mark on the landscape as a whole. Rachel Carson suggests that these non-selective chemicals should be called biocides instead of insecticides for this reason. As early as 1936, entomologist Edith Patch, the first woman president of the Entomological Society of America, no coincidence, I'm sure, expressed concern over the use of insecticides on fruits and vegetables. Patch's worry over the indiscriminate use of harsh chemicals in agriculture is echoed in the calls by Carson, whose effort in her seminal book, Silent Spring, is to call attention to the violence of indiscriminate use of insecticides and to make visible and dramatize slow death. Carson describes the impacts of wide-scale use of toxic chemicals, especially DDT, as death by indirection. This is not unlike the death by 1,000 cuts to insects that many entomologists describe. The nature of the decline in insect biodiversity and its attendant effects on working ecological systems is difficult to comprehend. And therefore the insect decline reflects the kinds of loss and change in the Anthropocene that occur gradually or with limited visibility. It can be thought of through Robert Nixon's idea of slow violence, which Carlson also discusses. As Chris will be annoyed with me if I misdirect who came up with it first. Rob Nixon came up with the idea of slow violence, but you can also use that term to explore Carlson's ideas of slow violence, which describes environmental and political calamities that occur slowly and are long-lasting. In contrast to our media's appetite for the spectacular violence, as Nixon describes, slow violence has an altogether different temporal scale and state of visibility, as do insects. Insect death is challenged by the same problems of visibility and scale, and I suggest that the films screening this evening explore these themes interestingly. In art history, insects are present in diverse ways, from the early modern period in Western Europe to contemporary interdisciplinary works, like most notably Anneke Yee's semi-autonomous flying Arabs in her 2017 In Love with the World exhibition at the Tate Modern. A common presentation of insects in art remains, however, to be more of a literal aestheticization of the insect form and behavior. In works like Damien Hirst's butterfly collages, beauty and color are hyper-emphasized, while butterflies are reduced to specimens and symbolic signifiers of death and rebirth. They're used as the artist's palette alone. Other hyperrealistic photographic and illustrative works zoom in on insect details as if to illuminate otherworldly mysteries and geometries in the bodies of insects. To put this simply, I basically just have a problem with the style of art making because it works on insects instead of with insects. The final two films that I'm going to show today are by Virginia L. Montgomery, and her efforts are like collaboration with the lunar moth, which I think are quite interesting. And the film Antworks by Catherine Chalmers is also part of her ongoing creative collaboration with ants, and it captures the ways that insects visually alter the natural world and can be thought of as art makers themselves. In cinema, there are also diverse and surprising visitations by insects, which I hope to show here. Although there is also a long tradition, mostly in Hollywood or bigger budget films, where insects are presented as monstrous mutations, dangerous and destructive. They're often enlarged and or swarming. And I'm thinking about films like Them and Mothra, which are more complicated, and they come out of a time when there's clear anxiety of nuclear fallout and insect, human, interspecies anxieties. So to conclude, instead of a spectacular single event of extinction, the loss of insects will be felt in stages and perhaps indirectly. The insect crisis in the Anthropocene requires close attention and creative methods of storytelling that attest to the complex lives of insects beyond the spectacular, symbolic, or grotesque. It is a question and challenge of locating insects in their fullness and making images about and with insects. The films presented this evening give not only a showcase of insects in experimental cinema and art practice, but also seek to find insects in intimate and creative ways. And find ways to dramatize slow death and the many ways insects live in the natural world and together with humans. This is why I'm thinking about today's screening, hopefully as an installment in bigger insect cinema under the title of Searching for Insects. That's my little thing. So we have 13 films. I'm going to introduce the first chunk, which is 7 that we're going to watch, and then take a break and then introduce the next ones. So we're going to start with Sound of a Million Insects, Light of a Thousand Stars by Tomonari Mikishawa. And this was made by exposing, it's a short film that was made by exposing a 100-foot long 35mm negative film for 6 hours under leaves, buried under leaves near the Fukushima nuclear power station, once an evacuation zone. Following that, we'll watch Sam Brackage's seminal Mothlight, which is made by collaging bits of grass, seeds, moth wings, flowers, etc., detritus, natural detritus, between layers of 16mm editing tape. And these films both explore the insect as the medium and as part of cinematic production. We then move to the artist and entomologist Irene Moon, where we'll watch 2 of her short films. First, Terroristic Entomology, which follows the transformation of larvae into houseflies, and the second is Perfectly Pleasant Decomposition, which engages with organic matter beyond the insect form, and these are kind of experimental entomological observations, which are quite cool. Then we're going to move to Catherine Chalmers, 2 works by the artist Catherine Chalmers. The first is Crawl Space, where she relocates insects into domestic environments, playing with humanizing insects and imagining fantastical part human, part rodent, part insect habitats that sort of veer over exploitation and profiteering of insects in interesting ways. And then her other work is ant work, where she uses ants collaboratively to make art. And then I'm going to finish the first section with 3 episodes from Isabella Rossellini's 2008 series called Green Porno, which are humorous little vignettes, humorous, sincere, educational videos imagining sexual lives of insects. Thank you.